Upstairs at Froelich, show 116, reel 1.
Sound high?
We should be fucking dead, my friend. What happened here was a miracle, and I want you to fucking acknowledge it.
This is a commercial for the movie, make no mistake.
Well, you interviews.
Yeah.
So you don't want to talk about anything serious?
I don't want to talk about what you want to talk about. I don't want to talk about the implications of violence. I haven't wanted, because the reason I don't want to talk about it is I've said everything I have to say about it. If anyone cares what I have to say about it, they can Google me, and they can look for 20 years what I have to say about it. I haven't changed my opinion one iota.
No, but you haven't fleshed it out. That's the only reason.
It's not my job to flesh it out.
No, it's my job to try and ask you to.
And I'm shutting your butt down.
And that's.
Did you know that the Bruce Willis character in Pulp Fiction is the person who keyed John Travolta's car? Did you know that?
I did not know that.
That's probably why Travolta hated Bruce Willis in that movie, staring daggers at him. You ain't my friend Palooka. Also, did you know that Vincent and Mia did not win the Jackrabbit Slim's Twist contest? As a matter of fact, they stole that trophy.
Okay, now is that hyperbole, or did they really lose?
There was a little bit of audio, and most people missed it, but from a radio show that people were listening to, where they talked about how the trophy was stolen from the Jackrabbit Slim's contest, which means they just grabbed it. When she said she wanted to dance, she wanted to win, and she wanted that trophy, she meant it. Now, they were pretty good in the movie, but, I guess maybe another couple of contestants were better. So they just took that damn trophy.
Makes perfect sense.
And they're criminals. I mean, the whole movie is about criminals. That's the great thing about Pulp Fiction. There's not one normie in here. I mean, the closest you can get to normal, I guess, might be Jimmy, because his wife is like a nurse and she works at the hospital, the graveyard shift. That's probably the closest thing.
I mean, they don't even say how he's connected to Marcellus Wallace or anything like that. It's just like, we just know he knows Jules. That's it.
It's like he calls him his partner in Toluca Lake, but I think he's just a friend. I think he's a friendly place. Basically, he's somebody who's probably legit, because you have to be a successful criminal, you have to have somebody on the inside, somebody on the grid, somebody who's legit to help you in various circumstances. So Jimmy's garage happened to be available because no one would ever think to go there. Maybe he's just a legitimate guy. This is our special about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I saw it on opening night, as did my in-laws. My in-laws, who are like, in their 70s, went first night, opening night, to go see the movie. They really liked it a lot. And then you saw it a day later.
I saw it the very next night because basically I had a babysitter that night that I didn't know I was going to have. Oh. So I was just like, fuck it, I'm going to go see this movie right now because I really want to go see it. Because it's like...
Wait, you had a babysitter? Was that the one with the shit, all the shit in her face?
Ha ha ha. No, not the one with all the shit in her face.
No, that's Jody.
That one went a little over my head for about 2 microseconds, but then I got it.
I'm probably going to pop a couple of Tarantinos in there. That's Jody. That's my wife.
But anyway, you're a lot older than me, so I will preface this by saying I have not seen every Tarantino movie in the theater. Unfortunately, Kill Bill was the one that was the only one I could start seeing them in theaters at because I wasn't old enough to see the first big three.
I didn't, I saw Pulp Fiction in the theater, and I dragged people. Because I got to see it for free as part of a preview, which was insane. I waited in line at Sam Goody for free passes to Pulp Fiction, which was going to be showing at the Beacon Theater across the street. And then I proceeded to drag everyone to a theater to see it. I even got to see it with a really good friend of mine, Fiona. And we saw it in a piece of shit, run-down Times Square movie theater that had sticky floors and smelled like piss. At New York prices, too, by the way. This wasn't a matinee. This was back in the days before Times Square became, very family-friendly. I even dragged my mom to see it. It's just like... And I dragged everybody in the world to see that film because it was such an incredible film. When this movie came, it was incredible. You were probably a kid around that time, right?
I was, but I actually saw it when it hit pay-per-view because I remembered the big advertising campaign that Miramax put behind it, and it just looked like this great movie that I wanted to see. And then I remember as soon as it hit pay-per-view, I freaking rented it, I recorded it, and I was honestly blown away by it. I was like, oh my God, this is like a voice we've never heard before in film.
There was 4 rooms, which was not that great. We're going to go through all the movies before we get to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Of course.
4 rooms I was really pissed off about. I really didn't like the movie at all. I hated what they did with it. The only thing the only thing I really liked was Robert Rodriguez's film. I thought his was the best. Tarantino's was all this build up leading up to this joke, which is where the credits roll, of course, of Tim Roth chopping up Paul Calderon's little pinky. You know, I mean, like, and there's this whole big setup, and it's a ripoff of an Alfred Hitchcock episode, The Man from Rio, which was based on a story by Roald Dahl, who did Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, among other things. And it was all just that sort of joke that led up to it. And it's good for a chuckle, but I was so pissed off at the end, I needed to see another movie, so I took my date or whatever, and we just grabbed the last screening of 12 Monkeys because I was meaning to see that, because I was in such a bad mood. We move on to Jackie Brown, which I just saw recently. Again, a really good adaptation of Elmore Leonard, probably the best adaptation of Elmore Leonard I ever saw. But
well, that and Out of Sight.
Out of Sight, containing the same character too, Michael Keaton's character. What's his name? Ray Nicoletti.
Yep, Ray Nicoletti.
It's an okay movie. It's just not really like a Tarantino movie. It's actually, it's very Scorsese. I like Scorsese back in the 90s.
It is. And you know what? But I did like it when I rent, same thing. I rented it when it came out on VHS, and I was very blown away by that movie, but I automatically like, well, everyone expected Tarantino around that time to do the next Pulp Fiction.
Well, that's sort of what you expect, and that's what the studio expects from you, is to just replicate that success, because anything beyond the formula terrifies these people. That's not only in movies, but in music too. If you try anything different than the record that sold 10 million copies and it doesn't sell, and they kill you, they destroy your reputation because of it. But Jackie Brown did okay. It did okay business. It didn't do Pulp Fiction level of business, though.
But it did great. But it did great on home video. That was
back in those days when Tarantino was making movies for really low budgets, though.
It was probably one of the greatest, I dare I say, blaxploitation films ever made, because that's pretty much what he wanted to do.
He wanted to, but there's so many things that are missing in that movie. Like I was telling you, it should have been shot in New York. It should have been shot like in Harlem and all places in New York, because New York is a much more interesting looking town visually. And until Once Upon a Time in America, where we see just how weird LA and Hollywood are set up as like this weird, it's a city in a canyon, and an enormous canyon surrounded by other canyons. That would have been more interesting, but the visual aesthetic of Jackie Brown was kind of boring, because it was all just a bunch of strip malls and weird apartment buildings and things like that.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, you open the movie with Across 110th Street, and yet the whole movie takes place in California.
Yeah, and I think you know why? Because New York scares Tarantino. He never shoots there, and it's something weird. I guess maybe it's that West Coast thing, because Tarantino has an interesting life, because he was born in Tennessee, moved over to California. My family, most of my family is from Tennessee and Texas. My mother was born in Nashville, but she moved east, so I was much more, I guess, familiar with the East Coast than I would have been with California. I've never been. I was in California once in my mother's belly. She went to Anaheim and watched the Rolling Stones concert in early part of 1972. That was the closest I've ever been to California.
I've never even been to California. I've pretty much been an East Coaster my whole entire life. I mean, outside of a couple of trips to Mexico in my youth, I've never really gone anywhere but the East Coast.
But I got to say, I mean, like, I feel like Robert Forster should have gotten that Oscar, because I always loved Robert Forster ever since Alligator.
From Dusk Till Dawn.
Oh, right, yeah.
He did do the screenplay for that, so that does count.
That I did see in the theater. The thing about it is I never got around to Jackie Brown in the theater, because I was dating girls at the time, and I just didn't have time. And nobody seemed interested, any of the girls that I was dating seemed interested in seeing Jackie Brown at all.
Well, From Dusk Till Dawn was another one I caught on home video, but man, George Clooney blew me away in that movie. It started off as a Tarantino film, and then it just went straight into this horror film, which was like what people expected, but it was just so off the wall crazy, though. But it was so awesome.
From what I understand, he wrote that script, sold it to KNB, Kurtzman, Bergman, Nicotero, and then he bought it back when his name meant something, and he wanted to do it himself or have Rodriguez direct it. I forgot to mention True Romance, too. True Romance started out as a very small little project that he was going to have William Lustig direct. And William Lustig was all set to do the movie when he pulled out, because Tony Scott was interested in doing it, and it was bought. Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2 was around I was already married to my wife. We went to see both movies in the theater. These movies I love. I love both of them. I love the way they're put together. They're put together like chapters in a book. It's wonderful.
I think they're amazing movies. I love the fact that he was able to get, you talk about people bringing people back. He was able to get Sonny Chiba to come back and do a role as a Tori Hanzo. And then he was able to get fucking David Carradine, of all people, fucking Kung Fu himself to come in and play Bill.
Yes.
And I
yes.
think David Carradine should have gotten a fucking Oscar nomination for his
Well,
work.
he
But
should have, and I think Uma should have too. All the work she did in those movies is incredible. And, for some reason, we have to pretend nowadays in the social political circles that there were no badass women being written in the past, that everything in 2019 is new. And it's bullshit. I mean, fucking Uma Thurman could kick the shit out of Brie Larson. And also, she's interesting, too. Brie Larson puts me to sleep just looking at her.
I mean, you tell Brie Larson, look, stick to drama, okay? That's what you won the Oscar for. That's what you should stick to.
Okay, and then after that, I sort of, I guess after the Kill Bill movies, well, actually, no, Grindhouse comes next, right?
Yep, which I did see in the theater on opening frickin' night. And that was, let me tell you, sir, that was an experience.
Grindhouse was a lot of fun. I saw it in the theater, too. Probably one of the last movies I saw that was not some kind of digital projection, although I did see The Happening the next year. But this was around the time when my mother was babysitting the baby, because she was born in 2006. We got a date night, and we got to see that, and yeah, a lot of fun.
Death Proof is basically just a loose retread of Vanishing Point.
Kind of. Well, I mean, it's a tribute in a way, because they're using the car. I want to talk a little bit about Natural Born Killers first. It was did you ever read the book? I think it was called Killer Instinct. It's a really good book written by Jane Hampshire, who was one of the producers. It tells the whole story of how she managed to get the script for Natural Born Killers. Tarantino was around. He was trying to get the financing together for Reservoir Dogs. He gave her the script. She read it. Out of everything that she read, and she had an enormous pile of scripts, that was the only one that seemed like it was good, number one, and number two, it was ready to go. And so she gets in touch with Tarantino when he still has Catherine James as his agent. Catherine James was an agent to all these up-and-comers, including Linnea Quigley, actually, as a matter of fact. And she had a very good relationship with Tarantino until Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs came out. And then, according to her, he just turned into a douchebag. And he didn't even want it to be made then after that. And he tried to discourage Oliver Stone from making it. He tried to discourage Oliver Stone from working with the producers in making the movie. And then they went out. They did manage to make the movie. But they gave him the story by credit because the script was... It had like all these elements that didn't really belong in the story because they were parts from other scripts. And from what I understand, Tarantino and Roger Avary wrote this enormous 400-page script, which they called Open Road, and it took elements from everything that we saw later on in True Romance, Natural Born Killers, and a couple other movies. But they did manage to make the movie, and it is, I do enjoy the movie quite a bit. It's a bit of a head rush to get into because Oliver Stone was just editing like crazy on that one.
Yeah, it's just a weird, I mean, I do own it I have it on Blu-ray, Laserdisc. I do think it's a good movie, but I think it's very far removed from anything Tarantino would ever do.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, Oliver Stone heavily rewrote that script. I mean, some of Tarantino's DNA is in that movie.
Next up would be Inglourious Bastards. And
which at a time was my favorite Tarantino movie, and I liked that movie so much more than Pulp Fiction.
This is kind of where I started to think that he was kind of disappearing up his own ass. I felt like the movie, about the first hour of it. The first hour of it was brilliant, and then it kind of gets bogged down in weird shit. That's sort of how I felt about Inglourious Bastards.
I shit you not, I saw that movie in the theater 3 times.
But it does give you an indication of what he did in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
It does.
He changes history. You know, it's very, very interesting stuff there. Pumping bullets into Hitler, that kind of stuff.
That did throw me for a damn loop, but then I sat back and I laughed at it. I'm like, you know what? This is cool. Tarantino's rewriting history. Let the man have it. I mean, but one of the best things that movie did, it gave us Christoph Waltz. You know, moving on to our next movie, fucking Django Unchained.
Okay, now the reason I didn't see these two movies in the theater, Inglourious Bastards and Django Unchained, which I've yet to see. I'll get around to seeing that at some point. I've seen selected scenes from. Well, I had a baby and we couldn't get sitters. You know, we were out in the middle of nowhere.
Dude, the movie's been on home video for years.
I know.
Oh, dude, I saw that Christmas Day. It came out Christmas Day.
He wound up getting another Oscar for that one. He got his first Oscar was for Pulp Fiction for screenplay, and then he gets Django Unchained for for that. But I don't really think he got the Oscar because it was such a great script. I think he got the Oscar because it was a hot button issue, and it was kind of like the antithesis of 12 Years a Slave. So slavery was a very hot topic back then.
I love every aspect of that movie. As a matter of fact, I tried getting my friend to watch it with me last night because he had out of all the Tarantino movies, he had never seen Django, and I'm like, wow, why? You know, he's a lot younger than me though, but we almost watched it, but then my kids were being rather annoying, so we didn't turn it on. John Shaft is the relatives to Django and Broomhilda.
Oh, really?
Quentin Tarantino came out and said, "Oh yeah, Django and Broomhilda are Shaft's great grandparents."
That's another one I haven't seen either all the way through. I've just seen scenes from it. Now, that's a movie that's incredibly divisive. There are people who will tell you it is the most brilliant piece of celluloid ever committed, and then people will tell you it's absolute shit.
I will say brilliant piece of celluloid.
I don't know why. I guess maybe because it takes place all in mainly in one location, I guess.
Yes.
But it's another period piece. I mean, like, you know, he kind of stopped making contemporary movies after Kill Bill.
You do, but I'm going to tell you why I loved that movie as much as I did. When I saw the movie, I had not read up on any of the production history. I sat there enamored with this movie. I saw it in 70 millimeter. I actually saw an actual 70 millimeter projection of The Hateful Eight. I have the program of it. I was so blown away by the tension and the character dialogue and is this person or is this person? I don't want to spoil it for you because you haven't seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When I walked out of the theater, I said, you know what? This is just like John Carpenter's The Thing. Come to find out, Tarantino purposefully played John Carpenter's The Thing for everybody while they were filming to get a sense of what it was like to be isolated. And
Yeah.
on top of that, Kurt Russell.
Yeah,
Come
Kurt
on.
Russell, Snow.
And if you, I mean, here's where I'm going to tell you. I know you love John Carpenter's The Thing.
Mhm.
I know you will love The Hateful Eight, no questions asked. And go and do yourself a favor. It's on Netflix right now in the extended version that's like split into 4 different chapters, but it is the extended version that was only shown in 70 millimeter. So Netflix is playing it right now like a mini series. So you could watch one part one night and then you could take a break and then watch another part the next night.
Okay,
But now we're on to the main attraction.
The main attraction, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Now 15 years ago, he was working on possibly doing an adaptation of Helter Skelter, the book by Vincent Bugliosi, and he was going to do this as a straight thing. He was actually going to do it, and I think he would. 15 years ago, if he had had the opportunity, unfortunately he didn't because CBS snatched up the rights again and got to do a remake of Helter Skelter with Jeremy Davies, I believe, playing Charles Manson in that one. It would have been more his sensibility to go straight with that movie back in 2004. He eventually threw it away. And then NBC winds up doing a show 10 years later with David Duchovny called Aquarius about the time of the Manson murders. And I guess he just put it on the shelf and just decided to work on Kill Bill instead.
I think another reason he may have not went back to it is because Zodiac came out.
There was Zodiac too. The thing is, okay, if you're going into this movie expecting something like Zodiac, or you're expecting something like Summer of Sam, you remember the Spike Lee movie, which is the closest I can come to this because that's another movie where you create fictitious characters around an incident or a series of events that actually happened.
Another movie, Bobby.
Bobby that was Emilio Estevez, right? Directed that?
Another movie about fictitious characters surrounded by a major event.
Surrounded by a major event, and even I fooled around with a script that I was very excited about. I was going to do something involving the sequel to Creature of the Black Lagoon called Revenge of the Creature, and I actually wrote the Clint Eastwood part because he has a very small role in that movie. It's like one of his first roles, and I was going to make him a very Dirty Harry character just to have a little fun. Never got around to it, and then fucking Shape of Water comes out, and that totally ruins everything because everything's got to be so important these days. And that's one of the great things about Tarantino is this movie is not important in that way. It's not important in a political, social context, and this is pissing off the social justice warriors. They hate that because they look at Sharon Tate in the movie, played by Margot Robbie, and she's not really doing much. You know, she's just sort of like window dressing for this whole... It's a story about Brad Pitt and Leonardo Di Caprio. DiCaprio plays this fading television star named Rick Dalton. Brad Pitt plays a stunt double and basically friend, because I get the indication throughout the entire movie that DiCaprio is a very lonely person and he likes hanging out with Brad Pitt, and Brad Pitt is just sort of there hanging out with him too. But but with this, this is not a political movie. It's weird too. The articles I've been reading about this movie, there's a lot of hate coming from assholes. People who are saying, "Oh, there's no black people in this movie. That all the women are stupid or whatever." I don't know. But
That's retarded. I mean, okay, I ain't gonna say that word. It's stupid. It's like
it is retarded. It's
why
absolutely.
Why do people have to look for something to hate? Look for something to get themselves riled up about.
That's just the way people are these days. They're just you're nothing if you're not boiling with rage about some bullshit.
I mean, you also
there's a
have
New York Post article about how Tarantino. This is his 9th film. He's only got one more movie he's going to do. He promises that he'll only do 10 movies and then retire. They're saying that movies aren't. Tarantino is just not right for movies being made these days. So it's a good thing he's retiring.
Oh, what the fuck ever, man. Okay, Tarantino is still the voice of our generation. He's still that voice. Dude, okay, this is Monday. Highest opening in his fucking career. $40 fucking million this movie made opening weekend.
But
okay?
Lion King made more though.
Oh, who gives a fuck about that movie? I'm a diehard Lion King fan. Saw that movie opening night back in '94. I didn't care. I didn't care. The way I see it, Disney pissed on my childhood. I don't care.
Movie, this movie could make. I mean, his movies are not like big box office blockbusters or anything. Pulp Fiction.
But they all make money. They all make money.
They all make money. He'll definitely recoup, and he'll probably make a little more than that. It might even. They might even close the books with more than $200 million at the box office.
Grindhouse was technically his only flop.
True Romance didn't do very well either.
You can't really count Reservoir Dogs or True Romance. You can't count Reservoir Dogs because it was independently released and it was only released in a small handful of theaters. It made a little bit of money, but it did its money on home video. Okay, True Romance, you can't count that one either because he just wrote the screenplay. He didn't direct it.
But it's interesting though. I think True Romance made $12 million at the box office, but it was released in over 1,000 theaters, whereas Reservoir Dogs was only released in 61 theaters but made $2 million, which is a much better average.
But then you could say the same thing about Clerks. I mean, Clerks was released in a very small amount of theaters. I mean, the movie was made for, I think Kevin Smith said it was like somewhere around the $60,000 range or something like that.
It was a lot less than that.
It was less than that, but it made like $3 million.
Yeah, it made money.
So the point is, you want to talk about a real flop that Tarantino had. The real flop was frickin' Grindhouse.
Well, a lot of people went to see it. Now, the big problem with Tarantino movies is there's so much in there you can unravel, but you can't really do it in one sitting. You'd have to go and see it, Again, I'll wait for Blu-ray. I mean, there's a lot I still remember that's fresh in my memory, but mainly there seems to be very little story in the movie. It's basically just the adventures and the exploits of these two characters. DiCaprio meets with Al Pacino, who's a producer, and tells him that he should be in spaghetti westerns or something like that, right?
Right, and the one thing I noticed about that, it
you gotta be in spaghetti westerns.
It mirrors Clint Eastwood.
I would say probably based it on that. I mean, Clint Eastwood was he developed a reputation after the spaghetti westerns, but it was something that he really didn't want to do. I remember that too.
Well, you got to remember he was also, now I always get the two confused, so forgive our audience and forgive me. He was big on Gunsmoke, or it was Rawhide. I can't remember. I was not old enough.
I believe it was Gunsmoke, I believe.
Okay, he was really big on Gunsmoke. Okay, when that show got canceled, he wasn't doing a lot. And then he met up with Sergio Leone and he said, "Hey, come to Italy, do these movies." And he did the $3 pictures. After those movies hit big, what happened? Bam, he got a career. Then he did Dirty Harry, and the rest is fucking history.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's exactly what this movie was trying to emulate. Was basically Rick Dalton as a Clint Eastwood character, you
could probably think that his career would go on and he would become that kind of Clint Eastwood type of guy.
But that's what I loved about it, is because it was like, it's not about, the movie's not really about Clint Eastwood, but he gave it the Clint Eastwood hook, just saying go to Italy, make some westerns, and then just come back and reap the benefits of it. Maybe you'll do good, maybe you won't.
I think, what he might have been doing, I think what Tarantino might have been doing was his own version of either Fellini's La Dolce Vita or Roma, that movie that came out last year, where he's recreating an atmosphere and then he's putting his own personality into it.
And there was some good Tarantino dialogue in there. Some.
It's later Tarantino, obviously.
Can we just get this out of the way real quick? Let's just both you and I agree on this. This is the one Tarantino movie that does not fucking feel like a Tarantino movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, but there was also Jackie Brown. We were talking about that too.
Yeah, but over time that's become a Tarantino movie due to the quick-witted dialogue and all that other stuff and just the cinematography. I mean,
there were some trademarks of Tarantino in there, like the bare feet. There's bare feet all over this movie. Everybody's barefoot.
Dude, the whole thing is after Sally Menke died, who was Tarantino's editor from day one. Fred Raskin's his new editor now.
Yeah.
The movies do feel a little different now that Sally Menke isn't involved.
Yeah, I would think that Sally would have been like, why don't we shuffle everything around? Why don't we put things in the beginning, things at the end, things in the middle? Right.
Yeah, and this movie does have very linear storytelling. They only do flashbacks. Like they never go non-linear. They just do flashbacks.
Yeah, and there's some premises in there that are introduced and then abandoned. Like I totally forgot after like an hour after it was revealed that Brad Pitt was suspected of killing his wife or something. Right.
Right.
I totally forgot about that because he doesn't go back to it. He shows us that Zoe Bell is upset at working with this guy because he supposedly killed his wife. We see a little bit of a flashback. I believe Rebecca Gayheart plays his wife. It's interesting.
Right, and she was so unnoticeable in that movie, man.
Yeah, because she was behind these enormous sunglasses. She's screaming and yelling at this horrible 3-pack-a-day voice, and he's just sitting there, with this grimace on his face.
With a harpoon gun in his hand.
Yeah. So it's like you introduce this, and then you totally forget about. I totally forgot about it. The flamethrower too. I mean. There's this flamethrower that he uses in the scene that very much echoes Inglourious Bastards. And then he pulls it out later at the end of the movie.
That was a great callback, though.
It was great, but it was unbelievable. I mean, that was like
But again, this is a Tarantino movie. It's supposed to be unbelievable.
A lot of this, the movie succeeds for me because like I said, I've never been to California. I've never been to Los Angeles and Hollywood. So I had no idea that this is a city surrounded by mountains. It's a city surrounded by canyons, and we're going up. And he's driving, too. And all of this is real, too, by the way. There's no green screen involved. And he's got period cars, and a lot of them don't look that great. The thing about it is nowadays when you're looking at a period movie or TV show, all these cars look incredibly polished and clean because it's these antique car dealers who rent the cars to the movie productions and everything, and they want them back in the same condition they let them go in. There's a couple of really fucked up looking vehicles in this, and that kind of adds to it. That's
what they did with Brad Pitt's car because it's really, really dusty.
Yes.
I like how they did that. Like they didn't make it like this spiffy, shiny car. It was just nice and dusty and a little dingy, but it still ran good.
Right.
And then he couldn't execute a 3-point turn, which was really funny. But anyway,
you're driving up these hills into these canyons where these celebrities live. The only thing about there's a couple of inaccuracies to the movie, which we'll get into in a minute. I get the feeling that Hollywood was not really as happy in as sunny a place in 1969 as this that he has created for this movie.
Well, yeah, the golden age had already come and gone at that time.
This was an era of uncertainty for Hollywood. It was an era where movies were not making money.
Yeah, they weren't. I mean, movies weren't. I mean, it was The Godfather was one of the movies that pretty much saved the movie industry back in '72.
Yeah, and that would come 3 years later.
Right. I mean, they allude to Rosemary's Baby in this, which I really like. They alluded to it. That was one of the few bright spots in 1968.
And Valley of the Dolls too. Valley of the Dolls was an enormous hit. But again, enormous hits back then were not like the hits that we have now. Enormous Hit was a movie that made its money back and then some. That was considered an enormous hit back then. There were some surprise hits.
In those days, you broke even.
Yeah, you were lucky to. You were lucky to break even. And then the summer movie comes, with The Godfather or Jaws. Jaws is a monster. That comes out. It costs $20 million to make, and it makes over $300 million. That was when we had the summer movie, the big hit, and then that's when it became about making as much money as you possibly could.
Well, two things to allude to that. One thing that we forgot to say was, number one, The Exorcist was actually the first real blockbuster because I think at the time that was the first movie ever to break 100 million.
Yeah.
That movie was, that wasn't.
That's like a fluke, though. I mean, like no one was expecting that movie to make that kind of money and have lines around the block.
But then Jaws was like the first big summer movie. We can both agree on that. But the first actual blockbuster was The Exorcist. The other thing we forgot to talk about, now the reason why you said Hollywood was in a lot of uncertainty at that time, that was because of Cleopatra.
Yeah, Cleopatra pretty much killed Fox.
Fox had to shut down.
Always is always forever, 'cause one is one is one. Look inside yourself for your father. All is none, all is none, all is one. It's time to talk time from behind you. The illusion has been just a dream. The valley of death and I'll find you. Now is when on a sunshine beam. So bring only your perfection, for their love will surely be. No cold, pain, fear, or hunger. You can't see, you can't see, you can't see.
I want to get into the more controversial aspects of it. Now, the thing about it is, I've been obsessed with the Manson murders for years. I've read all the books. I've read everything about the stories, about what was going on, what had happened. All the inaccuracies are present in the movie, but that's only because Tarantino is doing something fictional. And what he's doing is he's placing himself or people he created into that time period. Even though he was a kid, I think, what was he, born in 61 or something?
Yeah, or sometime in the 60s. I don't know exactly when.
Yeah, he's very much an old man, but he had that obsession too. If you're going into this movie expecting in graphic detail a shot by shot authentic story about the Manson murders, you're going to be disappointed. It's a Tarantino film. Even down to his casting of Margot Robbie, who I think she's a fair actress. I don't think she's the greatest actress in the world, but I don't think she's Sharon Tate. She doesn't really look like Sharon Tate. She certainly didn't behave like Sharon Tate. Sharon Tate around that time was very depressed. She was very upset. She was in a marriage with Roman Polanski. Roman Polanski was a legendary philanderer. He fucked around on her constantly. He didn't even know it. He tried to pick up a blonde woman one time, and she turns around, and it turns out to be her, Sharon Tate. He wasn't even aware that he was trying to hit on his own wife. And then he surrounds himself with all these people who know Sharon and people who are even in love with Sharon, like Jay Sebring. Jay Sebring was engaged to Sharon Tate. She broke off the engagement and started dating Roman Polanski. And they even make a joke about it. Steve McQueen, the guy who plays Steve McQueen, was a little too tall and his hair's a little messed up. He doesn't. Yeah. He's got Steve McQueen's kind of face, his features or whatever, but he doesn't quite look like him, you know.
Speaking of Steve McQueen, one of the we're going to inaccuracies, but a shot that I thought was so beautiful was how they digitally inserted Leonardo DiCaprio into The Great
Escape. That's right. Yeah.
That was a beautiful shot.
Oh, you know what? I did have a question. You know the whole bit there with the Bruce Lee and everything. Is it possible that was just because we start off with Brad Pitt on the roof fixing the antenna? He's fixing DiCaprio's antenna, and he's contemplating working or going over there to the studio to work on the Green Hornet. Did he actually go there? Or was that whole thing a dream? Because we go right back to him on top of the roof in the antenna.
I actually think that was
after
real
he beats the shit out of Bruce Lee and is kicked off the stage by Zoe Bell.
That was real to me because after when Brad Pitt drops him off on the set of Lancer, he says, "Hey, can you check and see if there's any stunt work for me?" And then DiCaprio's character tells him, "Oh no, this was the same guy who worked on the Green Hornet, so there's not going to be any work for you." Then he's fixing the antenna, and then he's remembering what Rick Dalton said to him about the Green Hornet, and then he does the whole flashback to when Rick Dalton had a guest spot on Green Hornet and how he was going to be the stuntman for Rick Dalton. And then he ends up, beating the shit out of Bruce Lee.
Okay, I gotcha.
So if you're asking me if it was a dream or if it was imaginary, no, it was not. It was real. That really happened.
So it's just sort of like a really extended flashback.
It was an extended. I mean, it gave the character some exposition to know why he was pretty much an unemployable stuntman and why he was Leonardo DiCaprio's friend / driver / handyman.
Because he throws Bruce Lee into the side of a car.
which blew me away. I mean,
That's
me-
another thing that
that
pisses
made
off
me laugh
people.
my ass off. I laughed my ass off so hard at that part.
That's another thing that pisses people off. They didn't like the treatment of Bruce Lee, and I was like, it was a really fun part. I really liked it, and also it kind of puts.
Quit crying. Quit fucking crying
It
about
puts
it.
it puts some things into perspective. Now, Bruce Lee was an excellent fight choreographer. He was an excellent artist in front of the camera fighting, and he trained the stars. He trained both Sharon Tate and Jay Sebring in the art of karate. He trained Sharon Tate for the Wrecking Crew, for her scene. He also did some work with her because she did like a small guest spot on the Batman TV show. And Bruce Lee was on the Batman TV show, and so was Jay Sebring. Now the both of them are being trained by Bruce Lee, and that's what makes the whole thing with you would think that Tex and Patricia Krenwinkel and Susan Atkins all busting into that house with knives and one gun and only a limited amount of bullets, how the hell they managed to kill a bunch of people. It's sort of one of these things that really fucks with you, actually. For years, I've been trying to put that together because I've always felt like that story didn't make any sense to me. How could three people, probably stoned off their fucking asses, go in there and go fucking psycho on a larger group of people? And
that nobody would even attempt to stop them.
No one would attempt to stop them. Everybody was completely mortified, stoned into silence. And I've always felt, actually, that what happened that night was not just a bunch of messed up people going over to kill a bunch of people. What I think was going on there might have been a drug burn, something along those lines, because Wojciech Fryczkowski and his girlfriend Abigail Folger, as well as Jay Sebring, were all a bunch of junkies. They were all incredible junkies, and as a matter of fact, I believe Sebring even had dealings, or Sebring and Wojciech even had dealings with Tex Watson, because the Manson family, in addition to fixing up doom buggies, which is how they made money, they also dealt a lot of drugs to a lot of famous people.
Okay, I did not know that.
Yeah, that was like one of their main things, and also a lot of prostitution going on with the girls, all the girls that were involved over there. But it does make you wonder. But I have to give Tarantino a lot of credit for this. He takes a lot of power away from those murders. Those murders have captivated and horrified us for 50 years. For 50 years, when we finally get to the final act of this movie, a bunch of things make more sense in this movie than they would make sense in real life. It's weird. It's one of these things where fiction makes more sense than the truth. They go up there in their car. The woman who's playing Linda Kasabian in the movie is Maya Hawke. She's in Stranger Things season 3, and she's the daughter of Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman. She goes and says, "I forgot my knife," which is actually part of the story. She did forget her knife, so she waited outside mainly in real life. So she's headed back to the car. Tex Watson says, "Hey, you forgot the keys." He throws her the keys. She gets in the car and drives the fuck off. And everybody's
and that made me laugh because I knew Linda Kasabian. She contemplated about driving off, but she remained as lookout the whole time.
Yes.
And
even
the
then,
other
these
thing
three people still decide to go on with their plan.
And the other thing that got me was that whole scene with Rick Dalton basically going out there saying, "Turn off your fucking car, get out of here, you fucking hippies."
He's got the margarita in his blender.
Yes.
And he's fucking screaming at these people.
Wouldn't you think that somebody in that neighborhood would have done that in real life? They would have heard that loud ass muffler and saying, "What the fuck are you doing in this neighborhood?"
Well, that's one of the things about the canyons. Nobody knew quite where the noises were coming from because of the canyons and the way that sound is reflected and goes around. You know, it's kind of around here, actually. You won't hear, because I have a bunch of driveways behind the house, big long driveways, and then a driveway on the other side. You might not hear something that's happening 5 feet away from you, but you'll hear something clear as a bell that's like 100 feet away from you. That's sort of how it was in those canyons. So, but some of the topography is a little bit off because Rick Dalton lives right next door, basically, right next door or next door to the driveway that leads to Sharon Tate's house. So you wouldn't be able to quite know where noises are coming from most of the time. But he comes out there with his margarita, and then they're like, "You know who that was who just yelled at us? That was fucking Rick Dalton. That was a guy from Bounty Law." And then
that made me laugh so hard.
Sadie says, "You know what we should do? We should take revenge on Hollywood for turning us into murderers or something." And that's when around the time when Maya Hawke's got this look on her face like, "What the fuck? I'm surrounded by a bunch of lunatics," even though they were going to go up there to kill somebody. somebody or whatever it was.
She's just like, fuck it, I'm out.
This final part seems to be something that might happen in real life. He's like standing there. He's high off his ass because Brad Pitt. He smoked a cigarette that was dipped in acid, so he's kind of seeing stars and shit. He's trying to feed his dog, and he's figuring out something's going on here. Somebody's about to come in here, and Tex is there. And it's a great scene. Unfortunately, it's not true. That's the only thing that's disappointing about it.
The only truth in that scene was the line, "I'm the devil and I'm here to do the devil's work."
He's like, because he was down there. He went down there to see, because he took the hitchhiker Pussycat, right? Who looks almost exactly like one of those girls I remember from a picture. I forgot who it was, though, but they called her Pussycat in the movie, and she offers him a blowjob while he's driving her. He's like, no, can I see some ID? You know, I mean, because that's generally how people react. They don't want to get entrapped into anything. And he goes to see George Spahn, who's played by Bruce Stern in the movie, replacing Burt Reynolds. And Dakota Fanning is there. She's the only one I really recognize. Apparently, one of those girls, one of the Manson girls, was Harley Quinn, who is Kevin Smith's.
Who I found, by the way. I found her in a still photo. She was just one of the girls who was surrounding Brad Pitt's character right before he went to go see George Spahn.
Right.
So I did find her though.
So it's a very disturbing scene because they all have these dead-eyed looks on their faces. But there's only two guys there, and he beats the shit out of one of them because he stuck a knife in his tire.
The only one that disappointed me was Dakota Fanning's reveal because, like, if you know anything about the Manson murders, you're gonna hear the name Squeaky. You obviously know about Squeaky.
Squeaky,
and then
she's the one who tried to shoot Gerald Ford.
You see the whole scene in the house, you see all the hippies watching TV on the floor, but then you hear the one voice whose face or body you don't even see. And then I'm sitting there in the theater, I'm like, that's fucking Dakota Fanning.
Yeah.
I'm like, I already knew. I mean, there was no build-up for me for there and I didn't know she was going to play Squeaky because I tried to keep myself as much in the dark about this movie as I could.
I did, unfortunately. Actually, can I say the Wikipedia, okay? I accidentally looked at the Wikipedia a week before the movie came out, and it had the whole story there, but it wasn't the story. It was completely made up to make it look as though instead of murdering Sharon Tate and the others, they kidnapped them for ransom. And then it's up to Dalton and Booth to go and rescue them. So somebody made up a story, and I think Tarantino made up the story just because he has had to deal with people stealing his scripts for years.
So yeah, I mean that makes perfect sense with the whole Hateful Eight debacle, basically.
Yeah. So I think that somebody like Tarantino or somebody close to Tarantino wrote that story just to distract. And then after the movie came out, the synopsis showed up. The real synopsis of the movie showed up on the thing. So in that final act, they show up. That was one of the funniest parts, actually. That got a really good laugh, actually, from the audience.
Oh, everyone in the theater was laughing their ass off when
he comes in, he says, "I know you. I've seen you before. Who are you?" And he says, "I'm the devil. I'm here to do the devil's business." He says, No. It was something stupider than that.
Like Rex.
Like Rex, and then I think Sadie or no, Patricia Krenwinkel's like, "Tex, are we doing this or what?" "Tex, that's your name." And then he goes, and then Brandy the pit bull fucking goes for him and just tears him to pieces. And then, everybody went ew because the dog didn't latched onto his groin.
Oh, I had that big grin on my face ear to ear when I saw that because, like you said,
tears everybody apart. And he throws a dog food can at Sadie.
That was brilliant when it fucking breaks her fucking nose and shit.
And she starts screaming and she's waving her knife. She goes through the window. She falls into the pool. There's blood everywhere. DiCaprio has no idea what the fuck's going on. And he gets out. And then this is where we have the Chekhov's gun thing with the flamethrower. And he just sets her on fire in the swimming pool. I should probably say there are spoilers in this whole thing.
Well, you can put that in the description.
Now, this is kind of like, how you have this plan. Let's say you have a plan to steal a bunch of diamonds. And you get your whole crew together, and you name them after colors, and everything is going just right, except it doesn't go right. Everything goes fucking wrong. It's like writing characters similar to Reservoir Dogs, and everybody dies in the end. But you're doing it in a real-life situation, something that involved real characters. That's what I was thinking about. This shit never goes right.
I'm going to have to agree with you on that. But at the same time, I will say that unlike most Tarantino movies, this one actually had a really good happy ending.
It did, actually. It did. And that's kind of what's sad about the whole thing, because when you look back in retrospect to what really happened, a lot of what really happened didn't make sense. This actually makes sense. You know?
And then on top of that, when you see that final scene and when the credits go up and you say to yourself, well, you know what? Even though that was historically inaccurate, did I really want to watch a movie about Sharon Tate and her friends getting murdered by a bunch of fucking hippie scumbags? Or did I want to watch them get their comeuppance? I think at the end of the day, I'd rather watch them get their comeuppance in a fictional fashion.
That's absolutely it. There was a really good aside from the AV Club that talked about this, about how he changes history with the movie. And he reduces Manson to what he should have been, which was just a footnote. He would have been just a footnote.
Just this hippie piece of shit who didn't amount to anything, who tried to have his own cult that went nowhere. Maybe all the girls, maybe George Spahn died, a couple days later, and for all they know, they could have gotten kicked out of California and maybe hitched a ride to someplace else in life and became another footnote in history.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we're left with the reality. What happened 50 years ago, should not have happened. It should not have happened.
I mean, then you look at what happened to Polanski after that.
Oh, yeah. This was considered, Joan Didion called it, the end of the 60s when this happened, because everybody freaked out. Everybody completely freaked out, and rightly so.
It was one of those things. I mean, you or I were never around for that, but when you read about it, you're just really irked out and say, how could somebody do that? You look at the Zodiac Killer, and then you look at Charlie Manson. And then you look at David Berkowitz. In his case, he thought his dog did it. His dog was telling him to do it. So he was just batshit crazy. You look at people like the Zodiac Killer and you look at Charles Manson, you say, how were people like this allowed to walk around on the streets unfettered, just unchecked? People like that shouldn't even exist.
Yeah, yeah.
And the sad part is, the real sad part about Manson is that a lot of this could have been prevented because of all the people that hung around him and knew how crazy and off the wall he was. Maybe if somebody would have said something, maybe he would have been committed a long time ago. Maybe it said, hey, there's this crazy fuck out there who's, planning these murders, who's just, this crazy asshole. Maybe you need to keep some tabs on this guy. All this could have been prevented, but nobody spoke up. And now we're left with one of the grisliest murders in history.
Yeah, that's true.
But
so,
on a happier note, though, Sharon Tate at least got her happy ending.
Yeah.
Sharon Tate lived on to have a career.
Yeah, he actually screened the movie for Deborah Tate, Sharon Tate's sister, and she really enjoyed it.
I think the only people bitching are the Bruce Lee fanboys.
Well, and also the social justice warriors, I guess. But, Tarantino has always been politically incorrect. I don't think he's one of these liberal or leftist fucktards that are right now pervading Hollywood and invading Hollywood and doing terrible things to movies.
He just wants to make movies and have a good fucking time doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like one of the few filmmakers out there who truly enjoys movies. Doesn't really look at it as a job. It's a job for a lot of people.
It is, and for him, it's fun.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's a born filmmaker.
Yeah.
I mean, you hate. I mean, Roger Ebert was the idiot who tried saying that about M. Night Shyamalan. We all know where that went.
All right. Well, let's wrap this up with our final thoughts about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I enjoyed it. It's not the movie you expect. Beautiful, beautiful production design. Beautiful, staggering. All in camera. No visual effects in this. What'd you think?
Everything that you just said. I mean, it's not a movie you're gonna walk into this movie expecting a Tarantino film. You're gonna walk out with something completely different. But at the same time, if you enjoy Tarantino, you're going to love this movie. If you don't like Tarantino, you might not like it. But I do have one question for you. Oscar predictions, good sir.
Oh, well, definitely. Okay, definitely cinematography.
Yes.
Nominations, of course. We don't know who's going to win. But I would say cinematography, production design, makeup, of course, the effects, all the prosthetics and everything. I think DiCaprio will get a nomination for his role because it was a DiCaprio I'm not used to seeing. He was not confident. He was stuttering. He had a stutter about him.
Screenplay.
The Lancer scene was a little too long, but it was nice to see Luke Perry, I got to say.
It was nice to see Luke Perry. Lancer could have been trimmed. I mean, there were a lot of trims that movie could have had, but outside everything, production design, cinematography, makeup, those are definite locks for nominations. DiCaprio is a lock. Screenplay is going to be a dark horse, and I think Brad Pitt, he may squeak one in there. He may squeak a nomination, but unfortunately, unless...
Oh, good sound, too. Got to say, great sound.
Phenomenal sound. Unless A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood turns out to be this ultra mega disaster, nobody's going to win Best Actor this year other than Tom Hanks. So, I mean, I would love to see DiCaprio win one again, but unfortunately, Tom Hanks is pretty much a lock. You know what? It is what it is. If DiCaprio gets nominated, I'll be happy.